Michael Kaskey-Blomain. He's our Sixers insider for 97.3 ESPN.com and all kinds of Sixers news. We send it out to him now to visit with him and find out the latest on the Philadelphia 76ers. Gee, Michael, so much to talk about and so many places to start, but I think that we should start at the obvious part, which is when free agency took place last Friday night, or technically Saturday morning at midnight. The Sixers made a splash going out and getting JJ Redick and Amir Johnson. Your initial thoughts on the guys that they got, and by the way, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Yeah, absolutely, fellas. I appreciate you having me on. And I was really happy with the moves the Sixers made in Redick and Amir. I think they were both, what they intended to do going into free agency was clear. They obviously, they wanted to add a couple veterans to, complement this young core that they have building. And they wanted guys that fit into, their scheme under Brett Brown, which is, pace, space, and defense. Obviously they got veteran leadership and floor spacing in those guys. And, with the 1-year deals, it's minimum risk. If it doesn't work out for either of those guys with the team next year, you cut ties after the year and you're no worse off. You're not tied into them for, multiple years as they get older. It's just, a short-term thing to help some of these young guys develop with players that will help, maximize their skill sets. So, I think both moves are pretty solid overall.
1 year, $23 million for JJ Redick, 1 year, $11 million for Amir Johnson. Veteran players signing 1-year deals, that's it's slightly unheard of in the NBA, or it's not commonplace in the NBA. Guys tend to look for multi-year deals or more money. With that in mind, Michael Kaskey-Blomain, we've been the first to criticize when Brian Colangelo messes up medical updates or isn't all that forthcoming with guys coming back from injury and things like that we want to know. But in this case, do you put a major check mark in Colangelo's column for being able to convince these guys to come on that 1-year deal?
Yeah, I think he's done a pretty solid job of, not only convincing guys to come, but setting it up so that, it's beneficial for both parties. Obviously, $23 million for 1 year for JJ Redick is, a little bit high, but like I said, it doesn't, that money was going to be spent somewhere for this team. And for Redick, it gives him a good, a year to play with this young team, help them out, and then re-enter the market next season when he's only a year older and will still have, some earning potential for him. I think, it's kind of the way that the league is going, where it's shifting away from, players wanting to lock into these longer deals to now you see, and kind of led by LeBron James going with the, basically the 2-year contracts, where they just want to be more in control and have the option to, cash in on updates to the CBA that's without being trapped into deals. So I think that the shorter deals are kind of, exemplative of what's going on in the league today. And I think Brian did a good job of, recognizing that and appealing to some of these veterans with, with the cap space that the team had.
Mike, thanks for joining us. When you watch Fultz the other night against the Celtics, he obviously had a couple highlight plays and put up a pretty good stat line, but it is still Summer League. How much stock can we really take into putting how well Fultz plays in the Summer League? I mean, when do we really start to truly evaluate him? Do we wait till the training camps, or do we have to wait until he plays a handful of games in this coming NBA season?
Yeah, I think, you need to wait till regular season is a few weeks in to begin true evaluations. But I think Summer League is important in the sense that you get a really good idea of, what he's capable of doing at this level. I mean, obviously the competition will be higher when you get to the regular season as far as, the players that he'll be playing with and against. So at that point, obviously, is when you can really see what he'll be able to do. But I think just seeing what he brings to the floor in a, an NBA setting, the other night he obviously showed a whole lot of things on both ends of the floor. I think it gives you a really good idea, at least, of the skill set that he brings to the game, especially his shot and the, just the quick trigger. He obviously has, confidence in his own abilities and his range. And, he was surprisingly athletic and quick on the defensive end, especially on the help side with, I think he had 3 blocks, which, is pretty impressive for a lead guard. So I think he just showed a lot of, what the Sixers really hoped that he would bring to the team. That being said, obviously we're not putting too much stock in a single performance, but I think you can kind of, get an idea of what he's going to bring to, the team in order to complement Joel and Ben moving forward based off of, his performances in Utah and then coming up down in out in Las Vegas.
Well, speaking of performance, when you talk about Fultz and then you go into Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, and Dario Saric, this is considered their core four. And if they actually do pan out over the next few years and they are pretty good and the team is competitive in the East and is competing with Cleveland and whoever the top dog will be in the next couple of years, how do you expect the Sixers to actually afford all four of them if they want to keep them intact? They're obviously all going to command top dollar at some point if they are this good as expected. Do you think they take the Warriors route and hope somebody takes a pay cut, or how do you really expect this team to be able to keep all four together past the next 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, that's definitely going to be an issue for this team. Coming up, it's obviously starting with Joel, who will be due for a potential extension this coming off season, and then moving on from there. It's eventually if you get to that point, hopefully it comes to the point where all these players were healthy and the Sixers are wanting and willing to give them the extensions. But contractually it would be really difficult to lock all four of them down to you hope that they're on the path to become max deal players. The CBA, with that said, it will increase, and again probably by the time that would be an issue for the Sixers, but. Down the road at that point, you would either hope, like you mentioned, that, one or some of these core players would be willing to, sacrifice a little bit to keep this thing together, or else it would be, as you mentioned, very difficult to keep all of those guys, locked up. Luckily, one thing is, like I was talking about before, Brian Colangelo has done a good job of not bogging down the salary cap moving forward at all with the one-year contracts this year and the same last summer. He's done, that's been at the forefront of his mind. I think that exact question that you posed, the concept of having to lock all these guys down in the future. I think he'll keep that in mind moving forward and try to maximize the space that they have for those guys. So, it's a little ways away, but it's definitely something that, could potentially be an issue. But at that point, it might be a thing that, it's a problem to have, but hopefully it'll be a good problem because that means that, all of these guys will be playing well and healthy and be deserving of potentially max deals.
We're talking to Michael Kaskey-Blomain, our 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers Insider. You can follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB. Mike, I want to ask you, you have Furkan Korkmaz coming over. He's supposed to be playing in the game tonight. It's being reported. I want to ask you, it seems like from watching him, he is basically JJ Redick. So part of me wonders, is this one-year deal for JJ Redick almost like a platform setup for Korkmaz to possibly fill a shooter's role, not this coming season, but more so for next season?
Yeah, definitely, Josh. I think that's definitely a possibility. Not just Furkan, too. I think it's, obviously JJ is not going to be the long-term option for this team at shooting guard, but they're going to want someone in that spot with a similar ability to space the floor like that JJ has. And obviously, from what we've been able to see from Furkan so far, he is, the skill set you would point to would be very similar to JJ, and the fact that he's, a guy that can shoot the three, space the floor. So I think that that's definitely, having him coming over this year with Redick on this one-year deal and seemingly, from what the comments JJ's made, he's open to kind of, mentor and work with some of these younger guys. I think that's definitely, part of the organization's intent to have Furkan and whoever else, some of the team's other younger shooters, kind of grow and potentially step into that role when, JJ leaves the team, whether it be, next offseason or down the road.
Looking ahead to also this coming season, you already have a pretty loaded roster right now of guys. How do you foresee the rotations of these players? Because obviously they can't all start, and they're not all going to play significant minutes every night because you have now a building depth at each position.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a pretty stark contrast from, all the past few seasons that the fans have endured when there's been, just a dearth of talent on the roster. There's been guys that, the average fan hasn't even heard of. At this point, it's going to be, I think training camp this year is going to be really interesting. There's going to be, a whole lot of competition for positions in general. But, I think that they'll use a rotation kind of similar to what we saw last year. I think Brett found himself really comfortable when he had, for that period of time in January when Embiid was able to be healthy and the team was winning games. They had a solid, 9, 8, 9, 10 and max man rotation that they would lock into. I think they'll try to do something similar like that again this year, but it would be difficult, obviously, as you said, with, there's a lot more talent on the roster this year than there has been in recent years. So you're looking at guys that have potentially been playing either here or elsewhere, not seeing, as many minutes as they're used to. But again, that's kind of like another one of those situations. It's a problem, but I think it's a good problem to have. I think it'll foster a whole lot of competition amongst, these are all younger guys, or not all, but, mostly younger guys that are going to be looking to make names for themselves. And I think they'll be, hungry. You see Ben Simmons in the practice facility all the time. Joel, obviously. I think these guys will be, hungry to make a name for themselves. And I think that the culture that Brett has fostered and that will be fostered just by the talent on the roster will only really benefit the team moving forward.
We're spending some time with Michael Kaskey-Blomain, our 97.3 ESPN Sixers insider. You can find him on Twitter at TheRealMKB. And you kind of alluded to it a minute there, Michael, about, we're talking about a team that a couple seasons ago won 10 games, and now the fans are so pumped. They're 14,000 season tickets sold. They're talking playoffs. We're talking playoffs here on the radio. And Mike Gill has said if everything goes right and they really exceed everybody's expectations, maybe they could go as high as a 3 seed. I pumped the brakes a little bit on that, but I guess my question to you is, do you see them making the playoffs? And if so, where do you think they fit in the picture of the ever-changing Eastern Conference?
That's playoffs are definitely going to be the talk, obviously, with the the talent on the team this season, and I think it's really easy to see why. By default, when you look at the East and what's happened, you see a couple teams that have just dropped out of the picture. During free agency, Paul George obviously leaving Indiana, the Hawks have kind of blown things up. I think those are 2 teams that are going to drop out. And then outside of the top 3, obviously Cleveland's the top dog. Boston has made the moves, getting Gordon Hayward to be right there with them. And the Raptors were able to, bring back Kyle Lowry and Serge, I think. So, yeah, you have those 3 teams. And then the Wizards probably at 4. And after that, I don't think it's outlandish to say that the Sixers this year could compete for the 5 spot in the East if they're, the whole team's able to stay healthy. I think there'll be, a whole bunch of teams in the mix, as there always is in that second half of the East, the tier of the East. But it's almost by default. I don't know that they're necessarily ready to truly compete for, in the real sense of the word, as they're, a lot of these guys have yet to play together. They're all super young. But I think that it'll be a great season for, I don't think it should ultimately be judged by whether or not they make the playoffs. I don't think that's the most important thing this season. But I think that, just with the talent in hand and the development of these guys, I think that they will. And it'll be, just a good stepping stone and learning season for the team to build and grow forward into a team that, can climb into that upper echelon in the East and be a perennial contender.
Maybe you want to make them 6 or 4, since no 5 seeds ever made the NBA Finals, but 6 or 4 has. So maybe adjust them in one spot of that. I'm just kidding. But that's something that I know Mike and I have talked about too, where the seeds come from that make the NBA Finals, and mostly they come from that 1 or 2 spot.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that in a few years, obviously, is the goal to be in that 1 or 2 spot. Brian Colangelo actually was talking at Summer League recently in Utah when he was watching the team. He himself pumped the brakes on the playoff talk. He said that he thought that it was getting a little bit ahead of the team, getting ahead of themselves with potentially talking playoffs. Obviously, with so many new parts and pieces, obviously he understands the excitement, considering, how much talent this team has added over the past couple of years. But, just because the East is down doesn't necessarily mean that a team, that jumps into the playoffs picture would necessarily be ready to contend in the true sense. And I think that's that's how the team's approaching it. They're not looking to, just jump all in right now. Obviously, by their moves in free agency, it showed that he's still taking the patient approach, which I think is really the wise thing for a couple of reasons. Obviously, they still have LeBron in the East and the Warriors. And I think that, a couple of years when these guys are developed and seasoned, this team could be, really, really scary.
Mike, when you talk about playoffs, that seems to be the talk for the Sixers by default, it's, as you alluded to. I mean, does missing the playoffs this year actually mean true disappointment for Sixers fans and also the team themselves this season, considering how many guys have left the Eastern Conference, and it seems to be a wide-open bracket at this point in the East when you go outside the top 4 teams. So by missing the playoffs, does that mean this is a big letdown for the Sixers this season?
I think it would be more of a letdown to the fans than it would be to the organization itself. I don't think that the team is necessarily using the playoffs as a barometer of the success of the upcoming season. I think it'll be way more, in their eyes at least, judged off, obviously the development of their players, how they play together, see how obviously Markelle and Ben are 2 consecutive number 1 picks that have never played, and it's never been happened before in league history that a team has debuted consecutive top picks in the same season. So it's it's definitely different and new circumstances for this team. So I think that and health obviously is the thing that's been hanging over. I think they obviously want to see that Ben obviously with the injury, Joel, they want to make sure that these guys are good. I think that making the playoffs is something that would come as a byproduct of the season being a good one. Just what the team being able to play well together. So I think that it would be disappointing if they don't make the playoffs. I think that's that's fair to say on both ends, but I don't think that it would necessarily be a huge red flag in terms of the team's process or development, as long as these guys are developing and getting better. But with that said, I don't think it's outlandish for fans and the organization to expect a playoff appearance this year.
Mike, I want to transition a little bit to what the Sixers are going to be doing beyond this year, because this whole rebuild has been more than just a 1 to 2 to 3 year plan. This has been a 5 to 10 year plan. Looking down the road, we always know that a lot of times when a team is rebuilding, some of the guys who are part of that rebuild are not there beyond the rebuild when the team actually gets to be good. So I ask you, are there guys on this team that you look at and that you suspect, even some of the big names you suspect, may or may not be part of this team when it gets to be a championship contender?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think the easiest is obviously some of the, few of the veteran guys, that just aren't going to be around by default. They're here kind of for a transitional period, being, both the guys that obviously signed this year. Jared Bayless is another one. And then there's guys that are good. They've served their role with the team, but talent-wise could probably be surpassed and might need to be surpassed for a championship team. And in that sense, you're looking at guys like, TJ McConnell, you're looking at a Nick Stauskas, guys that are solid level players, but if this team is really trying to build into a championship, perennial contender, it's guys that would need to, probably have just a more advanced skill set than those two guys. So I think that's another two. And then potentially, as much as I hate to say it, I think Dario Saric is potentially a guy that eventually might get, potentially move somewhere just because of his skill set and repetition of other guys on the team. As already this year there's kind of speculation as to if he would start, if he would come off the bench. There's obviously the chance that he develops and further this year and really cements himself as a guy that can't be moved. But I think that if there's any candidate of these young guys, and obviously Okafor, I'm not really necessarily taking him into account. I think out of all the young guys in that core piece, I think Dario has the potential to be moved just because of the lack of, a clearly defined role on the team. But, I think there's definitely, it's like you said, it's one of those situations where a team, through the course of seasons only can retain so many of their players. And obviously some of these decisions would be difficult coming down the line. But I think that there's only so many guys that they can hold on to. And I think there's only a few guys on this team, right now it's currently constructed that they would be very, strongly opposed to moving.
Speaking of guys on the team, we know that TJ McConnell is out at Summer League working with the young players out there. How much value do you put in TJ McConnell being out there? Because we know that it's good to have veteran mentors for guys, but what does that say about the Sixers and about McConnell that, first of all, he's willing to do this, and second of all, that they are comfortable with him doing this? Because some guys, they've been in the league for 1-2 years, and you're not really sure you want them around the younger players, whereas TJ seems like the kind of guy that you absolutely want around the younger guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it says a lot about both TJ and the organization. I think especially, under Brett, he's really worked to empower the players. He's said multiple times that a team runs best when it's built from the players up. The players, are confident and all that. And I think that's exemplative in that, letting a younger guy, like you said, who's only been in the league himself a couple years and who's still, quite frankly, has a lot to prove himself, work with some of the younger guys. I think that shows a lot about just the organization, kind of the attitude that they have. And obviously about, TJ, it's cliche to say at this point, but he's a guy that, he just loves working, loves the game, loves playing. And I think he really embraces, any opportunity to kind of further himself in this organization, through whether it be on court or leadership role, working with some of the guys off court. I think he's really, ever since he really signed with the team, he's kind of just made the most of the opportunity. And I think that's, just another example of him and the great attitude that he brings to the team. And it just fits in perfectly, I think, under what Brett has tried to instill with the whole organization and the players.
Michael, you brought up a guy a minute ago that I do have to ask you about, and there was some Woj news once the trade deadline or the free agency window opened, and that's Jahlil Okafor. Woj revealing that the Sixers tried to include him in a sign-and trade, but that deal fell through. Are they ever going to resolve this Okafor thing, and what's his future on a team that clearly has kind of indicated on multiple occasions, look, we really don't want you here, and he's not that comfortable being here?
Yeah, Pete, that's this is a question that I feel like has just been hanging over this team for what seems like forever now. I mean, Okafor just seems like the odd man out of pretty much anything, which is unfortunate, obviously, for a young guy that you spent such a high draft pick on just 2 years ago. But they're not they're not all going to be hits. Obviously, you're going to miss on some players. So I think that both sides would probably benefit from a split. I think Okafor obviously would appreciate a fresh start somewhere else. And the Sixers at this point, they've just been shopping him for what seems like a year. They're not in any way. All indications I've ever gotten from the team and people around them is they're not desperate to move on from him. They like Ja. They think his attitude about the situation has been good. He's still a good player. They don't mind having him on the roster. They wouldn't mind bringing him out with the second unit, but in the end, that they're not gonna he's not a guy that's gonna be here long term. I think both sides have kind of realized that at this point. It's just a matter of when and if a deal gets done where, that they find something in return for him. It seems kind of surprising that the deal with Boston fell through. It must, you don't know where the disconnect came, but, I expect his name not to disappear from the rumors, anytime soon.
He is Michael Kaskey-Blomain. He's our 97.3 ESPN Sixers Insider. You can find him on Twitter at @TheRealMKB, and read his work on our website as well. As always, Michael, we thank you so much for your time catching up with the Sixers and talking Sixers basketball with us. Again, they play tonight, a little later tonight, 9 o'clock start in the Utah Jazz Summer League. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for having me on, fellas. Appreciate it as always.